All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the New York State of Wine series. This episode is Cabernet Franc off. So, crafted in New York, but inspired from everywhere. And New York is a unique community of passionate producers who approach winemaking with a multitude of personalities and backgrounds. And so, we're here to highlight that with this second episode. Throwing Cabernet Franc into the ring with some of the most famous Cabernet Franc producing regions around the world, the Loire Valley, Argentina, and South Africa. So before we introduce our hosts for today, some housekeeping reminders for everyone. During the webinar, note that there are two communication methods available to participants. We have the chat section and then the Q&A section. So the chat is an informal way for you to communicate with other participants. Just be sure to select everyone in the to field, as it can default to panelists only. And then there's the Q&A section. And this is where we'd like you to submit your questions that we'll get to at the end of the webinar. And now for our hosts, it is with great pleasure I introduce Oz Clarke. He has numerous wine writing awards to his name, both in the UK and the USA. And in 2006, he won the prestigious International Wine and Spirit Competition International Drinks Communicator of the Year Award. And in 2009, the Louis Roederer International Wine Writers Award for International Wine Book of the Year, Bordeaux. Oz's frequent BBC TV and radio appearances are broadcast around the world. And in addition, he is an OBE, Officer of the Order of the British Empire, for services to journalism and television. And we have Isabelle Bachelard, who's born into a family of restaurateurs and has guided chefs, restaurateurs, and food lovers from all over the world for the last 20 years. Her time in Oregon first exposed her to the food and wine culture that she would later pursue in her studies. And Isabelle now is a Paris-based freelance wine journalist and author who writes and tastes for the Revue du Vin de France, VSB Vins Spiritueux Boissons, and Terre de Vin. And while she's often traveling the world exploring vineyards, and she considers the Loire Valley her second home. All right, so now off to Oz and Isabelle. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Katie. And hello, Isabelle. Lovely
Hello.
to see you. Bonjour, bonsoir, or bon après-midi, or whatever it is.
Well, it's still daytime almost in France.
Now, let's think about this grape that we're talking about today, because something is stirring in the world of red wine grapes. The old order is being rocked. The international big guns of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Syrah, and Pinot Noir have got a new pretender knocking at the door. A new pretender who seems to be surprisingly good at adapting to climate change. A new pretender who seems to be reassuringly able to grow well on a variety of soils. A new pretender who seems to relish different winemaking styles. A new pretender who has enough ripeness at 12% alcohol to give vibrant, well-balanced wines, and who can hold on to enough freshness and varietal character at 14.5 to give vibrant and well-balanced wines. But why am I calling this grape variety the new pretender? This grape isn't new. If it weren't for this grape, we wouldn't have Cabernet Sauvignon at all. If it weren't for this grape, we wouldn't have any Merlot at all, because this is the daddy or the mummy, depending upon how you look at it. This grape is the parent of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. This grape is Cabernet Franc. Now, people have been writing about this grape for at least 500 years, when Rabelais got rather fond of it, or perhaps it's 1200 years when the monks near Angers in the Loire planted some, or perhaps they've been writing about it for 2000 years, because those Romans, Pliny the Elder and Columella, well, they seemed to be writing about it as the local grape of southwest France. So, is it French? Well, probably. Some authorities say it came from the Basque country in Spain, and then it traveled north. One rather alarming theory is that it comes from Albania. But science and logic put it down as originating on the west coast of France, somewhere between the Pyrenees and Brittany. And it may well have been the dominant red grape in France's west for quite a while before it parented both Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, and then was completely overshadowed by its offspring and went into a long decline, except in the Loire Valley, where it still stubbornly reigns supreme. Now, there must be numerous reasons for its decline, but it probably lost out to Cabernet Sauvignon because of this grape's dark color and dense flavors and burly tannins. And it probably lost out to Merlot because this variety is so easy to ripen and its abundant fruit is so soft and juicy, but with enough oomph to age. And then Cabernet Franc sort of sat between the two, and except in the Loire, became sort of regarded as a filler, a less impressive variety to pad out a too chunky Cabernet Sauvignon, or to freshen up a too alcoholic Merlot. Well, is that fair? It certainly is not. And as the craze for dense, overpowering Cabernet Sauvignon fades, and as the craze for lush, alcoholic fruit bomb Merlots begins to slacken, there are signs in many parts of the world that Cabernet Franc just might be capable of making more delicious wines than either Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. Well, how? Okay. Several reasons. Firstly, with climate change, areas thought of as too cold for serious red grapes, and this goes as far north as Wales, they're getting excited by giving Cabernet Franc a go. Secondly, as the world warms, winemakers are discovering that Cabernet Franc actually holds onto its acids later in the season better than Cabernet Sauvignon does. So late season acids are better with Cabernet Franc than Cabernet Sauvignon. And not only that, but in hot conditions and at heady ripeness levels, to everyone's surprise, it holds on to its varietal character better than most Cabernet Sauvignons and most Merlots. So even in warm places like California and Argentina and Australia, Cabernet Franc is producing truly delicious wines at high alcohols. And Cabernet Franc copes much better with late season rains than Cabernet Sauvignon, or especially than Merlot. And this has brought it to the fore in countries such as New Zealand, Uruguay, Brazil, and states like Virginia in the US. And New York, well, Cabernet Franc ripens earlier than Cabernet Sauvignon. That's useful, especially in the Finger Lakes in the north, just below Lake Ontario, with its hot but short ripening season. It copes well with late season rain and with humidity, and that's useful out on Long Island as it reaches away out into the Atlantic. It develops real varietal character early, and that's useful all over the state. And there's another thing. It's the most cold hardy of any of the important Vitis vinifera red varieties. Now, in the winter of 2014, in upstate New York, the temperature fell to minus 24 degrees centigrade, minus 24 degrees centigrade up in the Finger Lakes, and a lot of vines died. Well, over half the Cabernet Francs survived. So today we're going to taste three fascinating, delicious Cabernet Francs from New York State. But to put that into context, we've chosen three wines from famous producers in famous areas elsewhere around the world. So, Isabelle, would you like to give us an overview of Cabernet Franc's role in France and in the rest of the wine world?
Well, I think Earls has been saying so many things that I might be a bit shorter because we have to get into the tasting. What I want to say about, of course, in France, Cabernet Franc is the grape variety known for the Loire Valley, with mostly Chinon, Bourgueil, Saint-Nicolas de Bourgueil, Saumur, Saumur-Champigny, and Anjou. But it's also grown in many other parts of France much more discreetly, because people tend to forget that next to the Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, most vineyards from the southwest of France, including Bordeaux, of course, are based on blends. And next to Cabernet Sauvignon, you almost always have a little bit of Cabernet Franc. You never know if people have it because it's a habit, because they think it's good, because they have it. But most people stick to a small proportion of Cabernet Franc everywhere in the southwest, including Cahors, next to Malbec, including Bordeaux, in particular the right bank in Saint-Émilion and Fronsac. You have to remember there is a big proportion of Cabernet Franc in Château Cheval Blanc, for instance, and they are very proud of their Cabernet Franc. And I think also it's interesting to remember that there's always been a fight, and there will always be a side fight between Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, because of the one that starts earlier and then it may freeze, the one that starts later and doesn't freeze in the spring. About 20 or 30 years ago in the Loire Valley, when I say 20 or 30, it's probably 30 or 40, there was a new trend of planting more Cabernet Sauvignon because it's allowed. And because it would ripen differently, and then it appeared that it was not satisfactory, and people went back to mostly Cabernet Franc. Voilà. Apart from France, there are many countries that use Cabernet Franc. Strangely enough, it's not the major grape. When you think of Italy, you don't think of it. If you look into detail, you find that in Bulgaria, for instance, there are some famous estates that make good wines with Cabernet Franc. And also, even in California, we haven't got any from California this time, but there are lots of estates who count on Cabernet Franc. And of course, the two major countries that we're going to study today, in South America, in Argentina, and in South Africa. And but it's still not the major variety used in all these states that we'll be having today. It's a side thing, but as Oz noticed, it may be the new grape that may become more fashionable than the other ones. There's a time for every grape. So after Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, perhaps the next one will be Cabernet Franc. Voilà, so I think it's time to go on to our American wines and have enough time for the winemakers to present them, because I think they are very, very fond of this Cabernet Franc, and they'll probably be the best people to speak about it.
Great. So, thanks, Isabelle. Now, should we just ask our three American panelists, winemakers, to introduce themselves? Josh, are you there? Here we are. We've got Josh Wigg from Lamoureux Landing. We've got Lilia Perez from RGNY, and we've got Christopher Bates from Element Winery. Do each of you just want to say hello and introduce yourself for very briefly, and then we'll go into detail later. Josh, what about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm very humbled and happy to be here today. My name is Josh Wigg. I am one of the partners at Lamoureux Landing on the east side of Seneca Lake in the Finger Lakes. I've been here since 2007. So we're, as a business and myself, still very young in the wine world, as Oz talking, going back thousands of years. As I said, we're very humble. We know we have a lot to learn, but Cab Franc is certainly one of our focus points for the next 30, if not 300 years in the Finger Lakes. So,
excellent. Christopher, what about you?
Yeah, hi, my name's Christopher Bates. I'm the owner and winemaker at Element Winery and newly coming Colloquial Winery. We have, I grew up here in the Finger Lakes, so been here much of my life, but we came back to this place about 10 years ago. And we started the winery here about 15 years ago. So Element started in 2007 or so. Yeah, been kind of pushing along ever since, doing my best to keep talking about the Finger Lakes. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for coming and joining.
Good to see you. And Lilia, what about you out on Long Island?
Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor to share the screen with all of you and with all the participants. Thank you. I'm Lilia Perez. I am the winemaker for RG&Y in Long Island, New York. My background goes back to Mexico. I started 12 years ago working in the wine industry, in the commercial side of it, most of it promoting Mexican wines nationally and internationally for the Mexican Wine Council. Then started working with the family, the owners for RG&Y, the Rivero Gonzalez family. And I started on the commercial side, but then worked on some vintages also in different regions of Mexico, such as Guanajuato, Baja California, and Coahuila. And then, but really my background on production goes back to France, in Bordeaux. I studied there my master's degree in viticulture and winemaking, and had the opportunity to work with nice, very well-known chateaux such as Franc and Tenac and in Margaux and Chateau Framen in Saint-Emilion, and work with a group of consultants for the Aquitaine area, which gave me a big overview and idea of how wine is made in Bordeaux in France. So now since 2018 that this property, that used to be Masa Clara Vineyards, got purchased by the Rivero Gonzalez family, I came with a new team and now in charge of the wine production. So I'm so excited to present today what we're doing here since 2018.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Housekeeping wise, I think we are all getting thirsty. It's probably my fault for talking too much. I'm used to it. Can we just tell everybody what order we're going to do the wines in, so that those of you who've got your boxes, just make sure we've got them the right order. We're going to start with Lamoureux Landing T23. That's going to be the first wine we have. The second wine is going to be Coulis du Toy Clos de l'Echo. That's number 2. Number 3 wine is going to be the Element Winery Cabernet Franc, number 3. Number 4, we're going to go to Argentina, to Zuccardi's Appellation. Number 5 is going to be Journey's End from South Africa. And number 6 is going to be RG&Y from Long Island. Now, I tell you one thing first, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to show you what to do. Get the bottle open, pour yourself some Lamoureux Landing, and start tasting that, start drinking that. I don't want to see, these aren't very big bottles. I don't want to see much in them by the end of this evening. So I'm just going to say cheers to everybody with this first mouthful of New York wine this evening. Delicious, drinkable as ever, Josh, deliciously drinkable. Now, I just thought we'd have a word about New York. Those of us who don't really know New York State, what does New York mean to most of us? I know it means heat and noise and bustle and concrete and crowds and the hubbub of big city life. And well, sure it does, but can it mean tranquility? Can it mean calm? A horse and cart rhythm of life, silence punctuated by bird song, by the buzz of bees, by the distant low murmur of a tractor carried on the fresh, bright country air, and vineyards. Well, if you want to discover how New York State is one of the most beautiful rural states in the whole of America, so long as you take away its pulsing heart of Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens, you should head for the vineyards, because New York has had vineyards for a very, very long time. Manhattan had vineyards in the 1650s. They didn't last, but as Europeans spread out from Manhattan, they planted vineyards as they went. And New York now has vines from the east end of Long Island, up the Hudson River Valley to Albany and beyond, right up to Lake Champlain, bordering on Canada's Quebec, and westward to the Finger Lakes just below Lake Ontario, to the Niagara Escarpment, and right across to the southern shores of Lake Erie. And these are just the main areas. There are lots of other wineries, more than 400, dotted across the state, which is now the third biggest producer of grapes in the whole of America. And today we're tasting wines from two of the most important areas of the Finger Lakes in the northwest and Long Island in the far east. And they're both fantastically different. And they're both these areas, they believe that Cabernet Franc could be New York's star red grape. Now, it's easy to think of New York as being an icy cold place. We've all seen pictures of winter snowdrifts piled up on the sidewalks of Manhattan. But then it's easy to think of New York as a boiling hot place. Again, Manhattan in high summer is about as stifling as any reasonable person could cope with. So is the climate hot or cold? It's both. The latitude of New York's vineyards is the same as central and northern Spain. That's hot. And that means summers should easily ripen any red grapes going. Not so fast. There's no Gulf Stream on America's east coast. And that means that inland, it gets fantastically cold in winter, too cold, they thought, for vinifera vines to survive at all. And it means a very short growing season. Well, the story of the Finger Lakes, which is a 4 hours drive inland from New York City, is the story of how over the last 70 years, they've found ways to exploit the climate's extremes to make unique wines, both red and white. But today it's red we're talking about, Cabernet Franc. So Josh Wigg of the beautiful Lamoureux Landings Winery, take us away. And first of all, Josh, can you tell us what the Finger Lakes are and why they're unique?
As you mentioned, it's the whole reason we're here, Oz. Very important historical point to make is we would not be here without these 11 lakes. And each one is different, each one is unique. You know, you have to go back hundreds of millions of years when the eastern half of North America was underwater. It's an ancient seabed. So that kind of sets the stage. All of those parent materials, those base components forming in that ancient seabed, and the plant and marine life and mud and silt that have now become limestone and shale and sandstone and siltstone. So if you go back about 2 million years, when the last glacial, event happened, it's basically 100,000 year cycles of the glaciers coming down from the north and raking the bedrock, churning up that ancient seabed, and then receding. And then doing it again over 100,000 years, and again, and each time getting deeper and deeper, and getting more and more of those materials in suspension. Well, the last time that they receded and have not returned as of yet, they just dropped all of that glacial till in a patchwork of soil along these very deep V-grooved lake beds. So of the 11 lakes, as I mentioned earlier, we're on Seneca Lake on the western facing slope. So there's vineyards on both sides. We, of course, being on the east side with western facing exposure, think that that's better. But, I'm sure others will beg to differ. However, very important, regardless of which side of the lake you're on, for survivability in the wintertime and diurnal temperature shifts during the summertime. So yes, it gets hot, it gets humid, 85, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And sorry, I don't speak hectares and centigrade. So you'll have to do the conversions on your own at home. But where it's getting up those daytime highs, and the nighttime it's falling, back to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So, protecting that acidity, the vines are able to shut down and lock in that acidity. So it's not being metabolized around the clock like it would in a warmer climate. So very important for everyone to kind of file that away, particularly for Cab Franc. Very, very important. The wine that you're tasting from Lammer today is our kind of flagship red. Cabernet Franc is where it's at for us. We have about 1,000-acre estate. 120 acres of that is under vine with vinifera, and about 20 acres of that is Cab Franc. So very important grape for us. Very expressive of where it's grown. Very cold hardy, so almost no worries if you're properly burying the canes or the base of the vines, covering up that graft union and some basal buds. So if you do have a year, which we don't want to have again, you're not ripping out 40 or 50-year-old rootstock. You're able to bring the vine back from those basal buds and not have to start over again. It's very important for us to be sustainable and grow things that are not only exceptional in the bottle, but are able to be sustained, year after year, vintage after vintage. So the T23 is the purest expression of Cab Franc that we can put in the bottle. No interplay of oak tannins whatsoever. So it's harvested mostly on acid. So there's a pretty large window in most seasons for Cab Franc in our climate, where you have that phenolic physiological ripeness that comes in, and we're going to grab it before we lose our acidity, because that's, to us, that's everything. So we're harvesting on acid. That's going to come in whole berry. It's going to hit the pad whole berry. So we are doing a lot of machine harvesting now, and that's for speed. And also removal of the stems, getting that clean fruit, just pristine berries on the pad. We're going to do a whole berry semi-carbonic fermentation with those, about a half to 2/3 of the way through fermentation. That's going to get pressed off, and it goes into stainless steel, where it's going to finish primary and go completely through malolactic fermentation in the tank. So that's what's going to capture the fruit. You've got a little bit of that intercellular fermentation that kicks off the primary fermentation. So a lot going on, but the point is it's all from the vineyard. We're not going to add anything in there in terms of oak or tannins that are going to interfere with that natural expression. So
what I love about it, Josh, is that my first time up in the Finger Lakes, I tasted, I think, your 2008, which wasn't quite as ripe and rounded as this, but the objective was exactly the same. And I noted that there's something beautifully floral. You're after scent, and you get scent in it. There's almost something like orange coming through it with that lovely raspberry flavor, and the acidity is a really good crunchy cranberry kind of acidity, which I must admit I think is absolutely delicious. The tannin is only very mild. You've got this floral scent plus this strange but lovely orange quality. I think as a drinking red, it can't be beat. And so I'm delighted you haven't changed it one bit, as far, except of course just made it slightly better each year. Josh, that's brilliant. One thing, by the way, what does T23 stand for?
Originally, it stood for Tank 23. So that was the first vintage, was in 2002. Yeah. So we've been doing this for quite a while, hopefully getting better every year, but it's outgrown. Tank 23 is a 500-gallon lot. It's now considerably larger than that, but still just as much care and only estate-grown Lamoureux fruit that's going into those fermenters and into the stainless steel.
Brilliant. Well, let's see what the French do with only estate-grown fruit, because Isabelle, I think you've got a really famous wine from the Loire Valley for us to taste.
I just put my microphone back on because I was coughing. So I should not cough because the wine it's a very interesting wine to taste. The Claude Lécault from Coulier du Teil is one of the most famous Cabernet Franc you can think of. It's been for a long time, especially because there was a 1964 vintage, which was so beautiful that, and there was plenty of it. Most people who had a chance to taste it once in their life have remembered forever. The style of the wine has changed over the years because originally the domaine Coulier du Teil used to do everything in large wooden vats. This has changed over the years, and they started using more and more new oak and barrels. And in the last 10 or 20 years, the new generation has changed things again, and they have given up new oak and they have given up oak totally. And this wine, strangely enough, is completely made in stainless steel. And I can tell you that in my notes, I found a lot of oak. I tasted the wines blind. I had no idea which country it was from, but I found some among the richness of perfumes. I had these notes of chocolate and currant and flowers, and this background of wood, which obviously is due to my imagination and the evolution of the wine in the bottle. It's 1978, not 1978, sorry. It's 2018, and it's a very, very hot, very sunny vintage in France in general, and mostly in the Loire. And the style of the wine is a bit different from what it normally is, because it has a roundness and a richness that you don't always find. I found it very pleasant at the moment, even though I found it a bit warm and not as easy to drink, even though it's already 3 or 4 years old. But I think it's interesting to see the big contrast between the freshness and the easy style to drink of the first wine, and this big red wine that probably would gain if it were aged a bit longer. And I think it would keep the nice perfumes, but the alcohol would soothe a bit.
As I was
Yes, I forgot. I'm telling you about the wine, but you want to know. So the Lécault is really very famous because it's facing south. It's a beautiful piece of land, and it's about in acres. It's about 52 acres. So it's a large plot facing south, facing the Chateau of Chinon, and it's a beautiful place. And if you go there in the summer, it is always very hot.
But it's astonishingly ripe. But I think it showed what I was saying earlier about Cabernet Franc. This is 15.5% alcohol. And even though it's bigger than I want it to be and heavier than I want it to be, I think it's still held on to its freshness remarkably well at 15.5 alcohol.
I agree. I was astonished by when I saw the figure, because I didn't look at anything in any information before I first tasted them. And I would have said it was, 14 maximum.
Yeah. Well, thanks for showing us that,
Thanks.
Isabelle. I think it's an impressive wine, even if it's slightly atypical. But then 2018 is an atypical year all across Europe. So shall we go back to something which is probably slightly atypical in New York now? This is Christopher's Wines. Hello, Christopher. Element Winery. This is a 2014. I am right. I haven't read the label wrongly, have I, Christopher? It is 2014, isn't it?
Yes,
now,
sir.
your winery is a fascinating operation, Element Winery. It's in Arkport, which it took me a while to discover where it was. I did discover that it doesn't look as though you do too many public visits, but if you do, the hunky-dory bed and breakfast is about 50 yards down to the left. So if you spend a little bit too much time with Christopher, he can just pop you off at the hunky-dory. Now you've chosen a very different model to Lamoureux Landing, but you are a local boy as well. So can you explain what your model is and why you do it, how you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I came back to the Finger Lakes after, really exploring wines around the world. And, my background as a sommelier, as a chef, as a hospitalitarian is really kind of what took me around and got me into the wine world. So I had been making wine in Italy, I'd been making wine in the Mosel. When I came back and started kind of questioning a little bit about what I'd been told about our limits and our potential here in the Finger Lakes. Growing up here, I heard a lot of, this is good enough for New York, or this is the best we can expect to do here. And, after seeing and learning more and more about the wines of the world, I've always questioned that. Why did we feel like there was a limit on our potential? Why did we say that the cap was here? And, and after a lot of thought, I think it's so much of what was being touted as great wine in the 90s and the early 2000s. And it was the influence that, wine had to be big and gloppy and jammy and black and viscous to be, great wine. Not calling out any journalists who supported that style of wine, but I think it really led to a big lack of confidence here in what we really can do, which is not that. I don't think that this is the place for 15% alcohol, black, inky, dark, viscous wines. I think this is a place for old school, kind of classic, ageable wines, the kind of wines that we're talking about from 1964 that have left lasting impressions on people. For me, the kind of wines that were grown in Napa in the 50s and 60s and 70s, back when 12.5% alcohol was usually achieved by chaptalization. So that to me is the style of wine that I'm fascinated with. I think primary fruit wines are nice. I think wine becomes special when it becomes secondary and tertiary. And so that's really what I'm striving for, is to make wines that, question a lot of what I was told when I was younger about our potential, question what's possible here, and ultimately wines that I hope will have the ability to age and develop like the great wines of the world that I've had the honor and privilege of tasting over my life.
Well, I love the way that you put as your objective: low alcohol, higher acid, mineral and floral aromas. Because here we've got a wine which is 7.5 years old, and it is developing those secondary flavors, which are, what would the French call them? I think Isabelle might call them something like sous-bois, undergrowth. When you've got some decay developing, but the decay is absolutely part. We used to call it, when we were learning about wine tasting with the old guys, delicious decay. When delicious decay started coming into a Burgundy or a Bordeaux, you thought, now it's really beginning to show what it can do. And your wine here is doing exactly that. And I think it's a complete delight, because it's kept as much freshness as you could possibly want. It hasn't got any intrusive oak or tannin on it, and it's beginning to develop these fascinating, not fragile, but curiously delicate. They're not going to fall apart at all. You could do that to them quite a bit and they'd say fine, but they are delicate. And I must admit, I think it's an unusual wine and a delight. Can you just tell us how you made it like this?
Yeah, so our kind of process is very simple. We started out as a négoce. So purchasing fruit was really kind of part of when we started with vinifera in 2009. Really, purchasing fruit was what we wanted to do, and we wanted to do that because we wanted the opportunity to explore the potential and the diversity here. I mean, when Josh was talking about the Finger Lakes and those 11 lakes, we got to remember how friggin' giant this region is. I mean, it is 100 kilometers north to south and 140 east to west or so. So we're talking about a giant tract of land with an immense amount of diversity. So now, while that all encompasses the Finger Lakes, the real story is what's happening really between Keuka, that little Y-shaped lake, and Cayuga right now. I think there's a few little offshoots on some of the other lakes that are popping up, but it's those three big lakes. And specifically when it comes to vinifera, I believe that the consensus would be that Seneca and Cayuga are still really the most important here. So, but I wanted to play with, Josh talked about how important being on the east side of the lake is and having that western exposure. I think that there is half of our industry who's on the other side of the lake might disagree with that, but I think that for me it was the opportunity to work with fruits from both sides and to learn about both sides, from ones that are right next to the lake and ones that are further up on the hills, from different soil types, and to be free in that exploration. So ultimately, kind of what we did was we wanted to purchase fruit. And this 2014, I hope it's not a problem to say this, but most of this fruit actually was from Lamoureux's farm. And I've had the privilege of working with their fruit for basically since the beginning for us. So our first red wines were made with their fruit. And ultimately, it's a really special place that they have there. So everything that we do in the winery is really about preserving where that fruit came from. So I'm never, at least with the element wines, I'm not striving to make the best wine. I'm striving to make the most transparent wine right now. So everything that we do is really focused there. So it's finding and working with good growers. I do go a little bit different here. I'm a hand harvest fanatic, which infuriates many folks here. But hand harvesting for me is imperative because it comes to an immense amount of sorting in the winery, especially in challenging vintages. We'll talk more about 2014 in just a second, but so we do a lot of hand harvesting. For me, Cab Franc, I always destem it and it goes into 1-ton macro bins where it ferments spontaneously, no additions, no adjustments, no enzymes, no nothing, just spontaneous yeast. Goes through spontaneous mallow, usually after being pressed off. So we'll press off in individual lots, and then they go from there into barrel. So 500-liter neutral oak. I bought most of my wood in 2010 and it was used at the time. So essentially I'm really just trying to pull everything out of that and just create an oxidative environment. The wines will live there for sometimes a long time, sometimes too long of a time. I think that this 2014 was probably 36 months in élevage before getting racked out, bottled, and then just settled and racked and bottled, unfiltered and unfined. So everything here is really what came from that vineyard. And you were asking about the 14 vintage earlier, and this I think is such an important thing. I saw somebody asking about vintages and questions about vintage variation, which here in the Finger Lakes is huge. We have an immense amount of vintage variation because some of our blessings can also be curses. One of the great things that we have is a really efficient growing season. It's short and quick because, as Josh mentioned, like we get up to 85 degrees, but we never go above it. We really don't go below 50 in the summer. So essentially from May 15th to October 15th, every single day, every single hour, every single minute is a ripening period. We're never shut down from heat. And let's just say we don't struggle with drought all that often. Anti-drought is more of an issue for us. So that can create some challenges during harvest. And it's one of the reasons that for me, like hand harvesting is so imperative. But the 14 was from that super cold winter you talked about. And 14 was a bit of a challenging harvest, but I absolutely adore the fruit that we got because we had so much natural crop thinning from how cold that winter was. And I'd throw it back to Josh to tell us probably a little bit more about that winter because I wasn't growing then, he was. That 13, 14.
Josh, you got your mic on.
Yep, I got it on now. Sorry. Yeah, everything is dry farming. I think that is an important point that those places that are irrigating, that are really trying to respond to that climate change and those dry conditions. Our soils are so rich, our vines are so vigorous. It's really a matter of slowing them down, and it's in terms of cool years versus warm years, or dry years versus wet years. All of our newer vineyards are pattern tiled. The drainage is put in before we plant, so it gets the water away quickly. Our soil type or types that have a structure that retains water when it's hot and sheds it when it's cool. So it's really ideal. In terms of the 14 vintage, again, subjective. I don't have the growing degree day charts out or anything like that. But I do remember it was a very small crop year for obvious reasons. We did have some damage to the vines above normal. But certainly not catastrophic. If you planted away from the continuous slope to the lake, and sometimes even on that continuous slope, it was very site dependent as to who suffered and who didn't. As deep as the lakes are, Seneca and Cayuga are by far the deepest. Seneca's almost 650 feet deep for the entire length of our property, at least. Cayuga's deeper in the middle. It freezes on the ends, but it stays open water for the most part. But Seneca Lake hasn't frozen over since 1912, so it's been over 100 years since we had ice. You have the prevailing wind that has to come, those Arctic blasts. They've got to come across Lake Ontario, or they've got to come across one of these two lakes. So our site it's as beautiful as it is. It's even more special for protecting these vines and allowing us to get some longevity in rootstock and start to experiment more with clonal selection and soil selection, site selection, to really flesh out, what the potential is on our site. And because of that glacial till, that patchwork that was laid down upon the last glacial recession, you can literally throw a stone across the road and you were dealing with the complete different profile in terms of soils and slopes. So it's just amazing the potential that's here if you have the curiosity and maybe the propensity for a little pain and a little risk.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that Christopher talks about working hard, relentlessly, despite opposition and doubt, with the understanding that we're creating the future of the wine region, shaping the definition of Finger Lakes. So with that in our heads, Isabelle, shall we go back to you and see what else the rest of the world has to offer?
Yes, of course. So we are after this very fresh and low alcohol wine. We go back to more average percentage of alcohol. So number 4 is Journey's End Cabernet Franc 2019. So it comes from the Stellenbosch area, and it belongs to the Cab family, who started in 1995 with only 20 hectares, and they've enlarged the estate since. The characteristic, which is a bit surprising for us, is that this vineyard is grown on granite, and we're not used too much of having granite for Cabernet Franc. And it I don't know how you will find the wine, but I found very interesting, because I thought it allowed these very nice perfumes that you normally like in Cabernet Franc, like red currant, and I found also the nice touch of wood, which is used for the aging. But what I appreciated mostly was the freshness in the mouth and the comeback of the fruit at the end. which makes it very easy to drink and very pleasant because of the freshness in the end. Probably due to the fact that that part of the Stellenbosch has nice breezes from the ocean and has a fairly fresh climate. Voilà. The interesting thing about the estate is also that they are very concerned about the comfort of the workers and the ecological aspect. They've won lots of prizes, including some that I didn't even know of. Like in 2021, they attained the WWF Conservation Champion status for their continued commitment to sustainable farming and conservation of native fauna and flora. Voilà, and they've been very active with COVID, and they provided last year 8,000 meals per week for 52 weeks to people in need of food in their community. So I think it's something to underline, which is a good. It doesn't taste in the wine, but it's nice to see that people are committed like that. Voilà.
Also, Isabelle, that they talk about fynbos, these amazing wild plants there, and they say, oh, it tastes of fynbos, and normally I would say, oh yes, I've heard all that before, but I smelt this one and I thought, damn it, it does taste of those, it smell of those amazing.
You really find it?
All around the vineyard. So I thought, well, at least this one does. But anyway, shall we move on to the next?
Yes, the next wine comes from another country quite far. So let me get my paper. So number 5, yes. So that's Zuccardi's 2009 Altamira Cabernet Franc, of course. So Zuccardi is obviously an Italian name, but the estate is in Argentina. But the family was originally from Italy, and the grandfather who started the estate was a scientist who worked on irrigation and improved the people were growing grapes and growing different things, not only grapes. Voilà. So about this wine, I was quite seduced by the strong violet and flowery perfumes and the powerful nose of the wine, and which evolves in the mouth a bit on chocolate, and it seemed more evolved than what I would have expected from 2018 or 19. I think I have
18.
It's 18 on the paper, but I have 19 on my notes, so I don't know where it was. Anyway, the interest of the wine seems to be in the fact that it has this big it has a good balance between the powerful, the chocolate, and the evolution, like some wines for me, which remind me not at all of the Cabernet Franc originally. I found it much more southern than what I expected from Cabernet Franc. And what else did I want to tell you about that wine?
I think one of the nice things about Altamira is that it's on limestone, it's on chalk.
Yes.
And not much of Argentina is.
Yes.
And also I like the fact that Sebastian Zuccardi uses concrete for his fermentation, and very big food to age. And I think concrete's got a real part to play in the texture when it comes to making red wines, especially in these warmer areas.
Yes, but some people also used to think that old casks or foudre were doing a very good job for that as well. To me, the wine at the moment is a bit young. I think it needs a bit more aging when we've compared to the wines we've had just before, which were already very easy to drink. This for me is a bit young at the moment.
Well, I think that and the South African wine are two more really good examples of the completely different styles that Cabernet Franc can do around the world, and yet they hold on to this, to me, this core of perfume. Even this Zuccardi wine, bigger and heavier and stronger, there's still a sort of perfume running through the middle of it, and I think I think both of those are really nice examples of what it can do. But
including in a fairly warm climate.
And very warm climate, yes. When you're up in, you're high.
And warm and humid. That's
it's hot. It's sunny, sunnier than Long Island, I suspect. Lilia, hello, Lilia. Shall we move on to your RGNY, which I think is another lovely example of the complete difference of Long Island and Finger Lakes, and maybe you could just take us through exactly what. Why Long Island is different in terms of where it is, the sea around it, the soils, that sort of thing.
Our location, yeah, of course. Thank you. We can go back to the map. Thank you, Katie. So we are located, if you see the map here of Long Island, we're all the way to the east, we're Riverhead. We're in the town of Riverhead, closer to the Bay Area, to the Great Iconic Bay Area. I think it's, well, the North Fork is called, it's different from the South Fork, as we are all covered by water, surrounded by water. So which means better conditions to ripen red grapes rather than only white grapes, as in the, we don't have this great mass of water as in the South Fork. So just to compare those areas, that's why in the North Fork, there's most of the wineries in the Long Island. We're about 70 wineries in that area. And we are one of the bigger properties in the area. We're 100 acres, 200 acres of property and 100 acres of vines planted. We're 87 in actual production. We have 14 different grape varieties, which is very normal in the area. Most of it is Vitis vinifera. I actually don't know people growing hybrids as in the Finger Lakes. We are mostly Vitis vinifera, but this is a sign, having all these 14 varieties, it's a sign, I think, of the very experimental area and very new area of wanting to know what we can grow and what we can do better here. Right now, just comparing to 2018 when I just came to now, I think we're going much more into finding which varieties are the ones that we can do better. And actually Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, I think, are two of the icons. As you mentioned earlier, of just Cabernet Franc, it deals good with humidity, which is a good, it's a very hard, difficult problem in the area. We have these diseases because of humidity, lots of rain, and yeah, just disease pressure, right? So I think it's so far, I think we've been doing very improving on Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc especially. And well, I'm very happy to show you the 2019 vintage, because this is one of the vintages, one of the best vintages actually in all the story of Long Island, comparing to 2019, which was one of the most terrible, that I was just about to leave the region, even though it was my first year. So this is an example of still very low alcohol wine, 13%. I think this is just the style as within the Finger Lakes. This is lighter wines, easier to drink wines. We're not pretending to be just type of Californian style or Bordeaux style, or we have other examples here of just bolder wines. I think this is the style of the island. I will just, if we taste it, you can see the actual color of it is light. You can expect a lighter wine from it, but I think it shows a very good acidity and good tannin, even though we don't have as much tannin structure or boulder in the grapes, no? So just to go more into how I made the wines, we do harvest both by machine and by hand, all our grapes, but mostly we sell about 60% of our grapes to local producers. We keep that 40% and just chose those varieties that work best for us and for our wines, so that we know that we can do better with them here. So Cabernet Franc is one of the ones that I chose just to do a smaller production, very handcrafted, very well caring for the grapes in the vineyard, to work on leaf thinning, cluster thinning, so we get the nice, good balanced yields and get this sugar and acidity well balanced, while looking for phenolic maturity, and trying as less as possible to intervene on the winemaking process. That's my philosophy, our philosophy, and just minimal intervention. We have some batches where we do wild fermentation, and we're just having much fun on those, like an orange wine, wild fermented or spontaneously fermented. And with this one, I did use commercial yeast, but did wild malolactic. I didn't add any bacteria. We did hand picking on this one. We do a second sorting on the sorting table, and then pass it through the destemmer, and then take it to this 1 ton macro bin, where it stayed cold for 1 or 2 days, and then started fermenting, and kept it 2 extra weeks just macerating, with the skins, and then press it off the skins and take it into barrels. It was about 45% new oak and 55% neutral oak. And I did malolactic fermentation there, and it stayed there just aging for 10 to 11 months, racking every 3 to 4 months. So that's the story on this one.
Well, I have to say, you worked with Brun Contenac, did you, in Bordeaux?
Right.
I can't think of a better Bordeaux chateau to learn about subtlety and delicacy and texture. So, and I think it shows really well in this wine. I think it's beautifully crafted, and I'm sure it has a long aging in front of it if you wanted to. I think this is the point of all 3 of these wines. Even Josh's wine from which is supposedly to drink straight away. I can see that aging if you wanted to age it. Christopher's wine has already shown us that it ages beautifully, and I think yours would do the same if you wanted it to. Well, I think these have been 3 wonderful wines from New York, 3 wonderful wines from round the world. Are there questions that people want to ask? And if so, shall we go to some questions?
So yes, I think we have one question here about how much Cabernet Franc is planted in New York State.
Obviously, everyone's decided that someone else is going to answer that question, and I am not that someone else.
Well, if we don't have it from one of the panelists, and we will get that information and send it in a follow-up email.
I have to say that one thing I was thinking about is, given that we're in 2022, is organic viticulture possible either in Long Island or in the Finger Lakes, or indeed is it necessary to even try? Should one just say sustainability is as far as we can go? Lilia, could you do organic in Long Island if you wanted to?
Sure. I think it's, we would love to. We are actually part of the Certified Sustainable group here for the island, which means that we are trying to work as much as possible with organic products and use as less treatments as possible. But it's been really hard to do it. And we actually tried on one of our blogs in 2020 with Viognier, which is already a difficult variety, but we could see actually how difficult it's to manage the weather conditions here and get grapes fully ripened and in good sanitary conditions. So even though we would love to, I think it's just hard to work with that.
And Josh and Christopher, I know you're both very keen on sustainability, but is an organic approach possible in the Finger Lakes?
Josh, you want to start that one?
Absolutely. I guess the question is organic possible? Yes. Is it advisable? Not on my site. That's all I can say. There's many people that are trying to do it, but in our, as a family, organic does not always mean better. I think they've discovered that the hard way in other parts of the world, and sustainable means that you're going to be here for another 80, 100 years, 700 years, 1,000 years. If you grow the same crop on the same piece of land year after year, you have to do it right, or you're out of business. So that's important to us. I think if we follow that philosophy, not only as Lamoureux, but as an industry, as a region, I think that we're going to be better off in the long run, and we're going to find those breakthroughs that are not only better for the environment, but elevate the grape quality and thus the wine quality. So we have open minds, and love to see all of the research. We're very lucky to have Cornell here in our backyard. We work very closely with them. We give them acres of fruit to play with. All we ask for in return is the data, and that's all we can do. And as things evolve in terms of climate change, in terms of really a cultural shift, in terms of the evolution of the world in light of recent events, I think it's very important that we all keep an open mind and don't close any doors.
Christopher, what about you?
So I'd like to echo a lot of what Josh said there. And I'd throw in a few things. I mean, I think, we need to be clear when we're talking about, organic versus biodynamic versus sustainable. And I think understanding and questioning what sustainable is really important, because it's become so synonymous with sprays or spray programs and certain additions. But when we talk about sustainable, I'd like to point out something that is massively sustainable at the Finger Lakes industry that everyone else's sustainable organic program doesn't talk much about, which is we don't irrigate. We have water here, and most of the rest of the world is irrigating their vineyards in places that shouldn't have things growing in them. So I would just suggest to be a little careful with that thought process. There is some people that I think have worked with it, but ultimately, like Josh, I really agree that I think we really need to worry about learning how to farm our sites best, and then can work backwards from there, and need to learn how to farm clean, quality, consistent grapes on a regular basis. That being said, our friends over at Weimer, I think, have been demoing biodynamics really successfully and doing some cool stuff with it. So I think it's a mixed bag right now, but yeah, I think it's possible, but I think baby steps are really important in that movement. I will just throw in, I do have figured out how much Cab Franc is planted here. It's 221 acres in the Finger Lakes. I don't have the New York number overall, but it is the third most planted grape after Riesling and Chardonnay.
Thank you, Christopher. Katie, where are we now?
We have some questions. I think we have time for one more, though, just to be respectful of everyone's time. So what grapes are you most excited about apart from Cab Franc, obviously?
Who's going to start? Lilia, you start.
Well, I can say, yeah, in Long Island particularly, as I mentioned, Sauvignon Blanc. I think we can do lots of different things with it. It could go well in blends. It can go. I'm right now doing an amphora, wild fermented Sauvignon Blanc, one with Semillon, the Bordeaux blend, actually 20% of Semillon with it. But it's we have good yields with it. We have good quality. Every year it surprised us with aromatic characteristics, and I think, yeah, it's one of the ones that it's highlight in this region.
Good. Josh, are you looking at something else?
Always. No, we're very interested in Gruner Veltliner right now. So that's we're planting every spring to keep up with the markets and maintain our estate bottled label. But right now it's a lot of Cab Franc, but it's a lot of Gruner as well. So we'll triple our acreage of Gruner here over the next few seasons.
Good. And Christopher, what about you?
Chardonnay, I think, has really stunning potential here, both as a still wine, and we haven't even started to touch on sparkling potential here, which is friggin' fantastic. Personally, I'm obsessed with Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon now as well.
Cabernet Sauvignon as well.
Yeah, thinking about old school 1960s California Cabernet, we can do that. Oz, can I throw something in here?
Yeah.
I wanted to just pick up on a comment that you made earlier when you started us out, which is that, Cabernet Franc could be New York's best grape. And I wanted to just best red grape. And I just wanted to double down, like, that is definitively where we're at. But I'd like to add to it, which is that I don't know that there's any other region in the world outside of the Loire that's as invested and showing as much potential with that grape, which I think is the thing that makes me really excited about it here, is we're finding the thing that we're good at and unique at in the world. So
that's a good point, Christopher. And probably a very good point for us to finish on. Katie, we've enjoyed ourselves. Are you ready to close us all down?
I am. Let's see. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Oz. Thank you, Isabelle, and our panel. And thank you all for your patience. I know we went a little over time here, so thank you for hanging on with us. And a recording of today's webinar will be published to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. And then all of you participants will receive an email with the link. And we'll try to get some answers for those questions that we didn't get to as well. So see you all soon for the next and final episode, Chardonnay Showdown on May 3rd at 12 p.m. Eastern. All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.